Hello, I'm your host, Peggy Ann Saltz, and this is The Groove, where we shine a light on the companies, the cool people at the intersection of content, community, commerce. And today I'm going to add another C to that list. We're going to talk about complexity, because my guest today helps us view complexity and the outcome of global events as an opportunity to build an economy that works for us all. And he doesn't just talk about it. We are indeed very fortunate because he has a blueprint you can follow to make sure your business or your organization can weather what he calls the storms of endless disruption now and in the future. It's all about adopting a mindset to make your business disruption proof, which is also the title of his new book. My guest, he has more than 25 years of experience in changing industrial age mindset into digital age opportunity. He does this by blending agility, human-centered design, and lean methodologies to ignite entrepreneurial action. He's well known already as the author of The Lean Entrepreneur, and we're going to deep dive into his new book, as I said, Disruption Proof. Brant Cooper, welcome to The Groove. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Peggy. Looking forward to it.
That makes you sound like a mover and a shaker. Now we're like ready. We're ready to be excited, to be shocked. And
I hope I can live up to it. Yeah.
So, I mean, your book, I'm just curious, disruption at this time. What timing? I mean, your book comes out just as we're able to accept that disruption is the new normal, right? It's part of our new vocabulary. Nothing is the way it was. And what a coincidence that you wrote it at this time. Was that a coincidence?
Boy, I set out on this project a couple of years ago based upon my work with large organizations around the world. And I didn't set out to write a pandemic book. But I guess writing a book during the pandemic inevitably makes it somewhat of a pandemic book. But it ended up being an interesting opportunity because those companies that I think had prepared themselves for whatever disruption might come fared pretty well. And so it's a unique opportunity to actually see the practices put into place. Do they end up making you disruption proof as I've promised? And, I think that the results are pretty interesting.
You said it yourself, disruption proof. That is the end game here. And you suggest that you can get there. Couple of steps. Ultimately, you want to be RAD, right? Resilient, aware, dynamic. That's the mindset to improve and ignite innovation, as you said. Why these three qualities?
Well, so resilient to me is really the key. We have to end up having resilient organizations, but we have to think through what that means, that you actually have to structure the organization in a way that, like a palm tree, it'll bend in the wind, but not break. So it has to be both strong as well as flexible. The way you get there is that you have to be aware of things that are going on both externally and internally to the company. And it has to be a conscious decision that we are going to become more aware. There are things that you actually have to do in order to think about what's going on the other side of the world, or what's going on with supply chains, or what's going on with factories in China, or internally, how are your people doing? What's going on with the economy? We have to, consciously build this awareness in. And then the key to, once you have all of this new information, can we dynamically change what needs to be changed internally in order to respond to those changes? And so that sounds obvious and it sounds easy, but of course, the way our companies are mostly structured and managed now, it's very difficult. So our present way is top down, inside out, hierarchical, yet all of the information that we need to be aware about is on the edge of the company. So it's exactly to the opposite end of where our decisions are being made. And so there are things that we need to do and implement in order to decentralize our decision making and empower the edge to be able to respond to those conditions that we're running into.
What about the examples now of leaders who can successfully demonstrate the RAD mindset?
A couple of examples that jump to mind. Gerber Technologies is a company that creates hardware and software for digital fabrication for fashion industry. So basically, people want to start automating the creation of their clothing lines or different articles. They can use this equipment. The leader at the time was a gentleman by the name of Karsten Newberry, and he's been a long time practitioner of lean innovation principles, developing empathy for customers, running experiments, using evidence, getting out in the world and understanding what's going on there, and then trying to figure out what's the right way to apply what you've learned. And in January of 2020, most of us had not heard of COVID-19 yet, but they have a lot of manufacturing facilities. Their clients have manufacturing facilities in China, and China was starting to become affected by the pandemic in January 2020, maybe even earlier. And so they actually started catching wind very early because of that awareness that something big was happening and that it could really disrupt their core business. All of their clients wouldn't be able to produce their clothes anymore, and obviously revenues would drop, and that would start sort of this vicious cycle. Before the end of March of that year, they had retooled their equipment and uploaded all these patterns and created this platform for all of their clients to start creating PPE in place of their normal articles of clothing. So basically what they did is they helped their clients pivot, and suddenly all of these companies are producing masks and gowns and this other equipment that was very much needed, but also kept their businesses afloat. So it demonstrates all of those principles. It demonstrates the empathy. It talks about the exploration. It uses the evidence to figure out what the right way is to go. And of course, the results were super positive.
What I love about your examples, Brant, is that it's about that awareness. And awareness is listening, but it's listening in a different way, because you also introduced the 5 E's in your book. One of them, big one, we're hearing so much about now, a lot, particularly in marketing, elsewhere, empathy. Empathy is everything. It's not just listening, it's putting yourself in your customer's shoes. That's a big one. How does this actually empower organizations? It's grasp these principles, feed into the RAD mindset. How does that work?
The key to any of this real change is the behavior of people. And in my view, you need the top to be bought in. You need them to fund the change. You need them to be great cheerleaders. You need them to walk the talk. But fundamentally, the change happens from the grassroots, from the bottom layer up. So empathy, they have to understand their customers deeply. It doesn't mean doing what your customers say, but it means understanding what's driving them, what's hurting them, what their needs are, desires, aspirations. The more that you can glean insights from your customers, the more competitive advantage you have. And empathy also then needs to be applied internally with your colleagues, with the people that are on your team, with leaders even. What's keeping them up at night? So we need to get to the sort of the beyond the buzzword of empathy. It's absolutely extraordinary that it's appearing in commercials now. I think all for good. That's good stuff. Like even empathy done poorly is a good step forward. But so we really need to get to the understanding of people, and that'll help us create products and services that serve more people, and get the economy back to creating value for human beings. And the same is with the other E's. The exploration mode, we have to admit what we don't know, and then we have to go into learning and exploring. Using evidence to cut through our biases, so it's not just our pet project we're interested in, but what really should we be doing based upon the evidence that's coming in, the data and the insights. And then the equilibrium is finding the right balance. If I know what I need to do, then that's fine. You go execute, but continuous improvement and running into obstacles means that there's uncertainty. And so we have to add in some exploration mode there. And then the ethics, like you said, it's more important than ever. With all the digital technology, it's really easy for us to implement things, processes, features, actions, responding to behavior and data that isn't keeping in mind what our values are, both as a corporation and personally.
So it starts with awareness. It's a big part of RAD. Where do you find organizations struggle the most here? You've spoken to so many organizations for your book and in your work as well, Brant. Where are they having the problems? Where is the barrier, the blocker?
I think it's, middle management has always been such a, sort of looked down upon, and everybody just hates, hates the word middle management. And my feeling is these days is that it's largely we've ignored that middle. And I think that we need to develop some skills and realign some incentives to empower the middle managers. It really comes down to the equilibrium, I think, is the toughest part for organizations. How do we balance the execution, the work that we have to get done, with this exploration mindset? How do we improve the work that we have to get done? How do we learn what we don't know? The fact is that if leaders are able to delegate authority, if they're able to decentralize decision making, suddenly these leaders will find that they have more time to be strategic. They can be more proactive in allocating their resources towards the priorities that allow them to execute more efficiently.
I love it also that it is there. It is the middle management, because I remember the days, and I'm sure you do as well, Brant, look for your change agent, find the people who are going to, from the ground up change. And here you're saying, no, empower the middle, because that way you're delegating as a C-level, and then it's coming from the ground up. It seems to be that there's just no way to stop this wave then.
Right. I think that's exactly right. But just declaring it with the megaphone isn't going to work. And the first thing you have to do is actually ensure that you yourself are being more agile, and so that you're demonstrating the behavior as well as cheerleading it. And so I think you're exactly right. You start by the delegation and empowering people. And empowering people sounds really easy, but it's actually hard. I struggle with this myself. You sort of figure that everybody wants to be empowered, and so all you have to do is kind of say it. Okay, well, this is on you now. You go figure it out. Workers have so long been trained to just simply do what they've been told to do, that it's a mindset shift. They need new skills. You actually can benefit from some training to really get them to truly act empowered. I literally tell my people, I don't care if you make mistakes. What I care about is if you actually input me so that I'm a bottleneck to every process that's going on. Mistakes are easy to correct. Once you run into them, it's just like any sort of obstacle, right? If they actually need me in order to make the next step, then everything is slow and not agile and not aware of what's happening in the world.
And in a way, middle management up to this point, if you look at all the management strategy and theory, that was the blocker that got in the way. And now you're saying, no, there's a value to that. And you point out something, an interesting part of your book where you raise it and just sort of tease us with it, Brant. I'd like you to explore this with me. You say organizations have to evolve and execute, and your new business emerges from within your existing business. A lot of companies miss that cue. How does that happen? How do they miss that very important cue? Because if your new business is in your existing business, that's actually good news.
I actually think I love that you picked up on that. I think it is good news. To me, the innovation industry sort of perpetuates this myth that the way the company is going to go forward is by having some sort of external factor happen. They're going to get disrupted by startups, or they're going to have some sort of internal startup team that's going to grow suddenly, and sort of the snake eating its own tail is going to then emerge as the new business. And I actually don't think that that's true. I think that there was a period of time captured by Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, where technology invention meant that a company could be completely reborn by this new invention. But we don't really live in that world anymore. If you look at most of the startups that succeed these days, there's no invention going on there. It's using existing technology in new ways. And so if we actually just extrapolate from that, my view is that companies will succeed in the future by looking at what they have now and using it in new ways. But there's a good example in the book of Cargill, where they knew they wanted to get into alternative proteins. So they didn't spin up, a startup and go, okay, you're going to go do an alternative protein. They were willing to sit back and look to see how the business market evolved and then figure out, well, how do we play in that market? And so they spun up a team that included pulling people from all corners of the business. So it's not like this innovation silo, or it's not this internal startup that's, spun out. It's leveraging the people inside the organization, the smart people in this industry, to spin up projects and really run experiments, trying to figure out what would the right combination of proteins and distribution and packaging and branding and all of those type of elements, what is the right combination? And they brought those to market as experiments. What's the right combination that will result in the type of revenues where that creates its own business unit or contributes to the existing business unit? So they might not see the return on investment for several years, but the core business knows that their future is dependent upon it, and so contributes, has a stake in these projects that are happening sort of on this more macro level. And so to me, it's a great example of using the exploration mode. It's a great example of using sort of the team of teams approach, and being agile in figuring out how a new business can emerge from within what the company already has.
So you're an advocate for an agile work environment and disruption proof, but you've also written extensively about lean methodology. Which workflow do you personally prefer, or which workflow do you think is now a better fit?
In my view, lean and agile do not run counter at all. They're actually highly complementary. So the lean in lean management and lean manufacturing is really about eliminating waste. And so you can look at the value stream. So all of the things that the company is doing in order to create value, not in order to optimize financial efficiency. And that's a super important distinction. It's not about how do I get more output for all of the input. It's all the way down to the end of creating value. What are all of the things that we must do? And so you might have to eliminate some of those things, or you're making them more efficient in order to be less wasteful in the creation of the value. And so that's really what lean is focused on. Whereas agile is a set of principles about how a team creates value in the world. So there's a complementary aspect of it where a team is self-organized, autonomous, self-aware, continuously improving in production of whatever their mission is. And so you can use the agile practices in order to become more lean in the lean sense. Even in the book, I talk about agile a lot with scare quotes because, of course, both with lean and with agile, there's been these massive implementations of it, and people start conflating the implementations of those philosophies with what the principles and the desired outcomes are of those particular frameworks. And so when I'm talking about lean and I'm talking about agile, I'm less talking about specific ways of implementing it than the philosophies and the principles that are captured in those ideas. Elimination of waste, empowering teams to be self-organized, hold them accountable to the appropriate metrics. And so I think they actually work very nicely together, which is probably why I was drawn to Agile after doing the lean work.
It's also inspiring that they do fit together, because if you have one camp or the other, you're missing out on one. There was the whole idea that lean, okay, that means stripping away the waste, but there were some that thought, okay, that means, again, to come back to middle management, that didn't have a place in that value proposition. You touch upon metrics. Now, they are going to change massively. Many of the major companies, you touched upon a few of them yourself. You think about something like an Uber or a Lyft. I mean, they don't own cars. You think about, great e-commerce marketplaces that don't have stores. So value is changing. What about the metrics?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I really think we're still hyper-focused on output efficiency. And we have this unending belief in economies of scale, but of course that again, what you're pointing out is that the economies of scale is actually kind of silly. If everything that you're doing is digital, then having a company dominate a market in terms of its market power doesn't make it more efficient because of economies of scale. So the metric, in my view, we're focused way too much on this financial efficiency of output. If we're optimizing for financial efficiency, right? If all we're trying to do is get more output for the input, then we look to lower costs of labor. So we offshore, we don't pay people as well. We use cheaper materials. Everything is driven by this financial efficiency. But if we actually just move the goalposts and say, are we creating the value for customers? Then suddenly we're still going to be financially efficient, but we don't necessarily use the cheapest materials, and we maybe need the craftsmanship of our workers here. Maybe we need to bring manufacturing back in some instances in order to reduce prices in the shipping, or create redundancies so that when supply chains fail, we actually still can create the value for our customers. And so we end up having different discussions and different optimizations if we simply move that goalpost a little bit.
Do you see examples of that in your book or around you?
I'm not sure I have seen examples of that yet.
Have to have a devil's advocate question here, though, Brant. As I do agree with you in principle, then you also need not only to re-educate companies, but probably also the financial markets that are going to judge them on this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think the financial markets are followers, to be honest. I think that we sort of use that as an excuse for CEO short-termism. I think a vast majority of the market is in it for the long term. And so I think that if you can demonstrate that you are creating a more rad company, if your company is going to be more resilient and it's going to last longer and it's going to be able to continue to create value during down times, during disruption, I actually think most of Wall Street will buy into it. I think it's very unfortunate that we tend to focus on the day traders. And, it's reported every day what, the stock market goes up or down, and the pundits or whoever's on TV makes up their own explanation on why it went up or down. And it's all just it's just monkey business. So why do we have this short-term obsession? That's maybe in our psyche somewhere. I don't know. But any CEO can stand up at any point in time and tell the market, this is what our plan is. We are going to become more resilient. We're going to become more redundant. We're in it for the long term. We're going to continue to maximize value for all of our stakeholders over the long period of time. You're either in or out. And at that point, Wall Street can decide whether they want to buy that stock or sell that stock. So there's numerous companies that do that sort of thing all the time. They talk about what their long-term strategy is and just lay it on the line. Your shareholders, you're either in or you're out.
I'd like to zoom out a little bit to your career because it's also marked by change, right? You got your start working for startups during the dot-com bubble. You have a feeling sometimes that history is repeating itself for you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that the entrepreneurship cycle, I think, does come around. It's an interesting question because you live your life, you don't necessarily see or understand the thread that runs through it. I never wanted to do things the same way as everybody else, but more than that, I wanted to empower other people to be able to live the lives that they wanted to live. And I think that my books about empowering employees is part of that. Teaching companies how to compete based upon creating value is part of that. I'm a capitalist, and I chose capitalism because I think it's the best way to solve problems. And I think when capitalism is functioning well, it stands up the middle class, and it emboldens, empowers, it creates a strong middle class, which I think is the strength of this country, and it's the strength of all countries, I think. And I think we've sort of let it slide here in the last 20 or 30 years or so, and now the digital age means that it's being retooled, whether we like it or not. And so here's a way for companies to jump on board, to learn again how to compete based upon creating value. And again, I think we get back to this virtuous cycle of what the best of capitalism can provide the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because digital can also democratize. I'd love you to leave us with a piece of advice, something every leader can take back in the workforce, something they can start on Monday, so to speak. What would it be?
So the way, to me, you really kickstart this change is by allowing your people to practice this exploration behavior. So form a team, even if you don't normally have teams, form a team and base the team's mission on something that you as a leader keeps you up at night. So something that's solvable and hopefully can drive some sort of near-term impact. Give that to your team, have the right metrics that are how you're going to hold them accountable, and let that team go figure it out. Do not tell them how to do it. Allow them to come back to you with what their plan is and how they are going to keep you up to date on the progress towards achieving that impact that you have set out as the leader. I think what you'll find is that you already have people that can behave this way. They just need the freedom and the space and the sense of safety to go and explore and find those solutions. And to me, this is just a great example of kickstarting this sort of change. It's a fun way to work. Your employees will be more engaged and more productive. And it really can be, if you do this enough, it can be the turning point for the organization.
And what's great about it, Brant, is that everyone can do this. It doesn't matter the vertical. It doesn't matter. Just find a project, empower a squad, and get down to work.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Absolutely, Brant. Well, Disruption Proof, that is the book. Thank you so much for sharing today, Brant. I really enjoyed a little bit of a look through your book, but also a tour of the top ideas, the top takeaways.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peggy.
And of course, thank you for tuning in. More to come in this series, more interviews, more opportunities to connect. In the meantime, this knowledge is for sharing. So spread the word, tell your tribe, like the show, share it, subscribe to the channel. If you want to find out more about how you can be a guest on this show, then connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or just email me at peggy@mobilegroove.com. Until then, this is Peggy Ann Saltz, signing off for The Groove.